Bob Zimmer is the MP for the area. He was also at that memorial with the Prime Minister and his leader, Pierre Poilievre, on Friday night, and he joins me this morning. Bob, thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
What was that like, the memorial, to have, I would imagine, most of the town there, as well as your leader and the Prime Minister?
Yeah, it was, it's been a tragic week, and to me, it was a beautiful moment, I think, where we all just united behind the very strong community of Tumbler Ridge and the people and the victims' families, and just to show them that, look, you have the entire nation behind you right now. And I think the leaders were very symbolic of that, that sort of that cross-country just sorrow and mourning. And I think it was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too often you see the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievre holding hands in prayer, and we saw that on Friday night. I saw you speak to the Prime Minister a couple of times. I wonder what you said to him as sort of the spokesperson, the representative of the community, in terms of what is needed.
Well, it was really just about mourning, and you get to know leaders. I know them in a personal way, and they're just people. They have kids themselves, and they sort of their hearts break as any parent would for their children. So it was really just about that. We had some meetings with the families just privately with Pierre and Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, and they were just listening to who these kids were, who the mother was who was killed. We talked to both of their children, and you just get to know who they are. So it was really around that kind of just getting to know who these people were, and the love that their families still have for them, and just help them grieve, and but help them also remember in a real positive way.
And what do they need? I spoke to the Public Safety Minister on Friday. You're going to see that interview after you, who said there are going to be some people on the ground on Tuesday to help, for instance, with like income supports for families. What are you hearing about the practical things that people might need?
Yeah, and that's sort of what we've been doing a lot of. So we just, there's financial needs. So, simple things. So, you have a crisis in your family, but how do you make your mortgage payment if you have to stay home from work? And how do you make your car payments and things? And dealing with funeral homes. We've been helping a family deal with getting in touch with funeral homes and transport of their children back to their communities and things like that. So there's a practical side, but then there's also when you're sitting there on the couch in their home talking about this stuff, you just cry with them and you talk with them. And the one young man's family, his dad brought out this toy that he had made his dad, this little truck, because his dad has a truck. And they didn't have a trailer yet for the truck. So his son made this, it's young Abel. And he had made this trailer, this little wood toy, and for his dad. So he has this toy in front, and what was just a woodwork project has become a very precious thing indeed to his family.
How concerned are you, or where is your thinking right now about mental health? Because we know that the shooter had been taken away under the Mental Health Act and tried to get help, and obviously that didn't work. Where is your thinking in terms of supports for mental health in rural Canada, in a place like Tumbler Ridge?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of concerns about that. Even just health, physical health as well, and mental health is very much a part of that physical health. We've heard there are lacks, across rural Canada. And that lack needs to be addressed. And so, no, we've heard many people talking about it now. I guess it's just from now, how does that happen? I will say, from the Premier to the Prime Minister to our leader, Pierre Poilievre, we're committed to finding solutions to make it happen.
And in terms of the firearms, Bob Zimmer, again, lots of questions around how this person got access to them, given that their license seems to have expired. What questions do you have around the safe keeping of weapons in a home?
Yeah, I've really tried to stay away from answering those kind of questions yet. I think. But they're good questions, and I will answer. I will say there's a lot of people rightfully asking, like, why did they get these firearms back after the mental health challenges? They were removed. Why were they given back, considering what we've seen play out here? So I think that's what an investigation will let us know a little bit more information about, whether there's an inquiry or not. You know, I heard your reporters say it can be more traumatic on the community.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of those questions that, you know, we never want to see this happen again. I will say if Tumbler Ridge residents and family members would say anything, we wish this would happen on, wouldn't happen on any community ever again. So I think we'll see where that goes. And again, it's early, but we'll be watching it closely, especially from my end as a local representative. We want answers, and we want to make sure that we have solutions afterwards.
I noticed on Friday, too, that the Premier said that the students don't have to go back to the school if they don't want to. Have you had any conversations yet about whether they plan to do that, or whether there's another location that those residents, those kids could go to?
Well, it's I talked to was communicating with the teacher last night, and the question is, well, where do you go then, right? Because it's not really, you know, there's other places you probably can go to have school, but it becomes a lot more difficult. So, but the Premier did commit to, he didn't want to see those kids, if they didn't want to go through the doors of the school again, to not have to. So again, we'll see where that goes. I just know even from the Prime Minister, Premier, us, you know, we're going to do whatever we can to make the community to make them as comfortable as possible in the steps forward in the next weeks and years.
Bob Zimmer, you're also a dad. I think you've got 4 kids, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we do.
How are you holding up? How are you doing?
Good. You know, it's you know, I just catch myself saying it again. Good. I guess I can say this, Rosie, and I don't want to get too. You know, Jesus has been the light to me in this time. It's tough. I by no means am as grieving and as close to the issue as the parents of the families and the kids of the siblings and all the rest of it. But he's really been a light to me, just in the dark times. And like we said, even for Tumbler Ridge, there's a cloud over Tumbler right now. But I will say the members of Tumbler Ridge want the sun to shine again. You know, there's a time to mourn, but they don't want to be remembered for this tragedy and this situation. It was a beautiful town before. It was beautiful people. They want to get back to that again. That's why they're there in the first place. It's just a beautiful community. So I think being here for them, for that, just to get back to that sun shining again in Tumbler Ridge is it's going to take some steps and some time, but we're going to be here.
Well, Bob Zimmer, I'm sure they appreciate all you're doing to help represent them in this difficult time.
I just wanted to show this, Rosie. This is Canada, Tumbler Ridge Strong. You can see that sticker. They made them right away. I think they were out within the first day, but I think the community wants us to appreciate all the love that everybody across Canada, the millions of Canadians have given them. And just last request I would have is just keep praying for Tumbler Ridge, keep praying for Maya. I know Maya's still in hospital, seems to be getting better, but we just ask that you pray for her and her mom and her family. And all the rest of the families, too, that are still hurting. Sure.
Thank you, Bob Zimmer. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you speaking with us.
Thanks, Rosie.
The RCMP revealed new details on the guns used in the Tumbler Ridge tragedy and the shooter's potential motive.
There was no specific targeting of any individuals. This suspect was, for lack of a better term, hunting. They were prepared and engaging anybody and everybody they could come in contact with.
4 firearms are under investigation now in connection to the shooting, 2 being seized at the school, 2 at the shooter's home. Firearms had previously been seized from that home and then returned under Canada's red flags that temporarily remove firearms from someone posing a safety risk to themselves or others. We now know the guns used in the shooting had not previously been taken from the home. On Friday, I spoke to the Minister of Public Safety about the shooter's access to firearms in the home before that RCMP update. Minister Anandasangaree, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I want to start with your trip out to Tumbler Ridge. You went right away. What was that like for you? What did you hear in the community?
Well, I, along with Minister Robertson and Premier E.B. and Kreiger, went out together as a federal and provincial government into the community. Certainly, unfathomable experience. The community is devastated. it's a very small knit community of about 2,500 people. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knew someone at the school. Everyone knew someone who died. The community is torn apart. But in this depth of despair, there's also some silver linings of incredible heroism by teachers, by even other students, by the RCMP who were there within 2 minutes, who likely saved many lives, along with first responders. So it is a moment where I think it's brought the community together. It's also brought the country together. It's brought so many different perspectives together as one voice to say we first and foremost extend our fullest love and support for the people of Tumbler Ridge, and we embrace them and we will support them every step of the way.
And I'll ask you about what that support might look like, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions about what we know about what happened. As you know, in 2023, there were new federal laws that came into effect that would allow firearms to be removed from homes where they believe that an individual poses a safety risk to themselves or others. In this instance, with the shooter, the firearms were later returned to the home because the owner of the guns petitioned for them to be returned. First of all, do you know if those guns were owned by the shooter or by the shooter's mother? Do you know that?
There are a lot of questions that will need to be answered. As you're aware, the investigation is ongoing. So I think once the investigation is complete, and RCMP is committed to providing more information on this issue itself, but broadly on the investigation overall.
And I'm going to keep asking questions, and we'll see whether you can fill in any of the blanks, Minister. The red flag, this is called a red flag law, just so people understand. Do you know why that petition was accepted and why guns were allowed back into that home?
I'm not aware of the circumstances. There's some speculation. There's some information provided by Deputy Commissioner McDonald a couple of days ago. But I think for now, the plethora of questions that are being posed, whether it's to me or to the RCMP or to others in the community, I think we'll have to wait until the investigation is complete, but more importantly, until the grieving process is complete. Like, this is very raw. As people were preparing for Family Day on Monday, some families are having to figure out funeral arrangements for their kids. There's 2 kids right now who are clinging to their life, Maya and Paige and their family. So I think there's a range of questions that people will rightfully have, and there will be answers forthcoming. I will be there to provide those answers, as well as the RCMP, but also to look at what the short and mid-term and long-term work that we need to do. But for the purpose of now, it is about grieving, and it's about supporting the community in probably one of the worst times in their history.
Yes, and please understand that these questions are not meant to take away from that or diminish that, but the questions are present already, and there will be, I think, a need by the community to have answers to some of the things I'm asking. So I'm simply trying to see whether you know things that I don't know specifically. So I'm just going to go back to the issue of the red flag legislation, because I know back in the fall you funded a number of organizations across the country to sort of raise awareness about this legislation. Do you think that this legislation, red flag legislation, is working broadly? Do you have any way of determining whether it has made a difference?
I think the questions around whether our laws are effective and what we need to do to strengthen them again will be answered. And I go back to what the immediate concerns are, which is the community that needs support and love to heal and to start that healing process. The range of questions that are in the public domain, whether it's through social media or through other snippets of information people have, it's premature for us to make any types of conclusions without having the RCMP fully offer their perspective on the investigation. And we, you know, our commitment as a federal government, my personal commitment is to be there to answer those questions and to respond accordingly. But you know, as the Prime Minister is going out with other party leaders to support the community in mourning, all Canadians, I think, are united in our grief and united in our resolve to ensure that this never happens again.
Right, and again, the questions I'm asking are in that line, and I understand you maybe don't have the answers yet because the RCMP is investigating. I'm going to ask one more, though, because you are also moving forward on a gun buyback program across the country that is having, I would say, it's not clear whether it's going to be ultimately successful, given some provinces don't want to participate. Do you know if the weapons used would have fallen under the gun buyback program?
At this point, there is no clarity on that, and again, I will wait for the RCMP to give us additional information.
What is the federal government doing then to support the community, other than, of course, your presence and the Prime Minister's presence? What practically can you do here?
We have already spent the last couple of days in Tumbler Ridge. We met with the mayor along with Mr. Robertson, as well as Premier Eby and Minister Kreiger, along with local elected politicians, including Bob Zimmer, who's the MP for the area. Our commitment clearly to them from a federal perspective was to support the community in every which way they need support. We will have regularized coordination calls for the province. As is, when we met with Northern Health, they required additional resources for mental health support. The province is advancing that. We have a range of supports that are available, including income security for parents who are grieving the passing of their children, as well as others who may have significant impacts, including other kids' families from the school who are traumatized and who may not be able to go to work. So we will have that available. We'll have Service Canada personnel on the ground starting Tuesday, so right after Family Day. We will have public safety officials there as well to coordinate broader supports, whether it's on mental health and youth and other types of support that the people need. The bottom line here is that we will be there with the community every step of the way. We will support the province of British Columbia, and we will work in tandem with them to offer assistance of any kind that the federal government may be able to do.
All right, Minister Anandasangaree, thank you for taking my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
At a vigil for the victims of the Tumbler Ridge shooting, political leaders put politics aside to grieve with a community still suffering from the violence of this past week and offered the support of all of Canada.
But I, the leader of the opposition, the leader of all the federal parties, wanted you to hear, not from Ottawa, not through a screen, but standing here together in your home. We wanted you to hear the Canadians are with you, and we will always be with you.
The Prime Minister spoke of grace, and indeed, Prime Minister, you have shown tremendous grace in bringing together the leaders of all political parties and flying us here together as one. We all lead political parties, but today, there are no Conservatives. There are no Liberals, New Democrats, Greens, or Bloc Québécois.
BC Premier David Eby was also at the vigil where he spoke, and he highlighted the brave actions of a teacher, Mr. Deely, and some of his students during the lockdown at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School.
Mr. Deely, seeing a student in distress in the hallway, critically injured, brought that child into the classroom. Mr. Deely and two students administered first aid to that child, provided that child with comfort and support, all the while the bigger kids in the classroom supporting the smaller kids.
The shooting, in which 8 people were killed, including 6 children, has rocked the tight-knit BC community and as I'm sure you know, the country as a whole. As Tumbler Ridge mourns, many questions around the shooting remain unanswered. On Friday, police released more information about the number and type of guns involved, saying they are now investigating the use of 4 firearms, 2 retrieved from the school and 2 from the home of the 18-year-old shooter. I spoke to BC's Public Safety Minister on Friday. Minister Krieger, thank you for making the time for us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And obviously my condolences to your province and to the community of Tumbler Ridge, where I know you were there early last week to be with the community. What was your sense when you visited about how people are doing?
It is a very special place, Tumbler Ridge. It was my first opportunity to be there. And, we're hearing the town referred to as small, as close-knit. And that almost doesn't do it justice. It is a community where absolutely everybody knows each other, where there's 1 degree of separation between everyone. And the impact of this tragedy is profound. People are, of course, in shock. This is the immediate aftermath. And it was so important, I think, for the Premier and I to be there with the Mayor, with residents, with first responders, with educators, to ensure that they know that we are with them, not only in this moment, but that we'll be with them in the long term as well.
And obviously, the investigation is ongoing, and that's sort of I think where people's minds are turning to. How did this happen? How can we prevent it from happening again? So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and we'll see whether you have any sense of things at this stage. Obviously, a lot of questions about the firearms. The shooter did have a license that expired in 2024. Have you been told anything about how the shooter got those weapons?
So I have the details from the police investigation, which is now in its infancy, and certainly the questions about the owners of the guns, whether the guns were in the home, how the shooter had access to the guns, are top of mind for everybody, and of course, first and foremost, police investigators. And so we'll support them in doing their important work, and I'm sure more questions will flow for that we're committed to acting to responding to as leaders.
We know also because of the police, the RCMP, that the shooter did have a history of mental health problems, including a moment where she was apprehended under the Mental Health Act and taken to the hospital for assessment. At this stage, do you think that the Mental Health Act is sufficient in the province, or how are you viewing that given these events?
Yeah, we'll be looking to the investigation and what it reveals about the person's interactions with the mental health system to make determinations around resources. We know that mental health supports are spread thin across the country, and certainly in rural and remote communities. And in the immediate aftermath of the events, really our priority is ensuring that the mental health supports are there in place for families, for community members, for educators, and to get the help that they need during this challenging time.
And I want to ask you some more about what the province is doing, but I'm going to ask one more question around the guns, if you don't mind, because there is a sort of red flag law in place in this country which tries to protect people who have mental health issues from getting access to weapons. In this instance, the police have also confirmed there were weapons that left the house and the owner petitioned for them to come back in, and so they were back in the home. We don't know if they're connected to what happened in Tumbler Ridge, but I wonder whether you think red flag laws are sufficient for this country.
Yeah. We'll be looking not only at the events that transpired on that day and that led up to the horrific shooting, but also, of course, the shooter's previous interactions with police, and we'll certainly be open to addressing any gaps that exist to ensure that do everything we can to ensure that such a tragedy does not happen again.
The RCMP did respond very quickly, we're told, within minutes, although the school was locked down and it took some time for them to go through the school and make sure that people were safely evacuated and everyone was okay and that things were being responded to properly. What do you make of that response? The fact that the RCMP, of which there is not a huge contingent, was so present so quickly?
You know, that this is a small community with a small detachment that was there within 2 minutes. And we're fortunate that the majority of the officers were on duty and they ran towards gunfire. And certainly their training, their professionalism, their courage saved lives that day. And we are so grateful to the RCMP and to the fire chiefs and the first responders and everybody that acted so quickly to respond to this scene.
What about what has to happen now, whether it be support for survivors, support for the families who lost children? What kinds of things are you providing as a province, or what kinds of things do you need?
Yeah. So support for families, support for those that are grieving in the broader community are certainly our first priority. And we've mobilized crisis response teams, counselors, specialized victim support services, not only in the community center, the health center, but also in the schools, of course, and for the broader community. And we've heard from local leadership of the importance of maintaining that support network in place for as long as it is needed, and we'll certainly work to do just that.
As the Minister of Public Safety, when you heard this news, what went through your mind?
I think in that moment, I was Minister of Public Safety, ensured with the immediate safety and the resourcing of police responding. Yeah. I was also a mother in that moment. Thinking of every person's worst nightmare in terms of an act of violence, an act of mass violence in a safe place of learning in our schools, which are so central to our communities and our kids' lives. And I just think the need to ensure everything was in place operationally for police, for victim services was first and foremost. And I was so grateful to be able to travel up to Tumbler Ridge with the Premier immediately, not only to give them assurances, the community members, in terms of our support operationally, but also just to connect with people as a person, as a mother. This is a community going through unimaginable grief, one of the largest mass shootings in our country's history. And I know that they are heartened by the outpouring of support from all levels of leadership, really across this country and far beyond.
Nina Krieger, BC's Minister of Public Safety, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Rosemary.